Hello everyone, welcome to my fifth lesson in my 3D modeling for 3D printing course. And today we are going to talk about Sculpt Mode. And you can find Sculpt Mode right over here. It's under Object and Edit Mode, Sculpt Mode. And as you notice, this whole list of options show up. But before we get to that, one thing to note is that you can only sculpt whatever vertices you have on hand. For example, I'm going to press G to grab. This is one of the more important ones in sculpting, and I will show you what that does. I'm pressing F to change the brush size. Okay, so as you can see with the grab brush, I can kind of pull at this and kind of shape it however I want. But as you can see, it's still maintaining its shape because if we press tab to go to edit mode, it still has the same number of vertices. And that's not really what we want in sculpt mode. Like if that's what we're trying to do, we should just do this in edit mode to be more precise. So the first thing we need to talk about is we need to add geometry to this cube. And one thing to note, this default cube right here is 2 millimeters squared. So if I were to just print this cube without changing any settings, it would be a very tiny square. So just in context, let me add one of my models. Okay, so this is just an example of how big the default cube is. So here's a cube, and this is my Dragon Knight model. As you can see, by comparison, it's huge, right? And this is a picture of me holding my Dragon Knight. So as you can tell, the cube that we start with is very small. And I just want you just to be aware of that fact, okay, as we move on. Okay, so let's get rid of this. And back to the cube. Okay, so we are going to blow this up a little bit. I'm just going to scale it by 5. 5 times 2 millimeters is 10. So this is roughly the size, not roughly, exactly the size of a centimeter cube. Okay, and we're just going to play around with this in Sculpt Mode. Okay. And there are several ways to add geometry to this. And the first, and I think the most common way, is dynamic topology. Right here where it says Dynotopo. You just click that on, it'll say whatever. You just say OK. And then now we can add geometry based on how far zoomed we're in. So we're just going to use the draw brush, shortcut X, to just kind of add stuff, okay? So now if we look at that, we see this circle that's protruding. And if we go back into edit mode, you can see that these vertices were added, okay? And yeah, that is the first. But if we zoom in, let's zoom in. Oops, for some reason that unclicked. If we zoom in, as you can see, it adds a lot tinier detail. So we have this circle within the circle. And then if we could zoom in more, yeah, even more detail. And then edit mode, you see that there's so many more vertices here. And yeah, this is just showing you how we can start manipulating this cube to look like something not like a cube. Okay, we're just gonna Control Z until we get back. Okay, the second way to add geometry to our object is going to be the Subdivision Surface Modifier. And as you can see, when you click that, it kind of turns it into a sphere. And if you increase this levels, then it'll increase the number of like divisions that it makes. And as you can see, it makes uh, almost a perfect sphere. But yeah, when we go into edit mode, remember this is just kind of like a preview until we hit apply. We're not going to hit apply because I'm just going to show you one thing you could do to kind of make an object that's like smooth. And to do that, we're just going to do the loop cut. And we're going to put it like this, just near the edges. And as you can see, when we do that, it kind of flattens it out a little bit. So we're just going to do that to like every side. It's kind of looking like a marshmallow. And yeah, so when we do that, you can see that it looks like our cube. Let's go back to object mode, but the edges are a little bit smoother. Okay, so we're just gonna hit apply. And then now when we go to edit mode, you can see that it added all these extra geometry. And one thing that you might notice is that there's like a whole bunch near the corners. And that is actually one of the bad things about this technique. So that when we go into sculpt mode and we're trying to, let's say we're trying to draw, remember dynamic topology is off now. So it's just going to mess with the vertices that exist. And as you can see, when we do this, it's a little smoother, right? But no matter how far in or out, it's going to be the same, I guess, resolution, because it can only mess with the vertices that exist here. Okay, and then if we take the grab, we can do this, and we could do things like this. Okay. So that is the second way to add geometry. Okay, and the third and final way to add geometry is my personal favorite, but it's not recommended in all cases. Okay, so we have this regular cube with no extra geometry added, and then we're just gonna hit this remesh. And currently the voxel size is 0.1. But the lower number, like it goes, the more like faces it'll make. And there is a shortcut for this. It's Shift R, and then you could kind of move. So point. Where's 0.1? Okay, so this is like around 0.1, right? So those are however big the voxels are. So if we were to remesh and then this is like to apply remesh, that's how many like vertices we get. And as you can see, as opposed to the other methods, this is a lot more evenly spaced out. So yeah, this is my favorite way because of that fact. But it adds vertices everywhere, and you might not need vertices everywhere. And the more vertices that you have, the longer it's going to take for your computer to process. So if you have a lot of these, these objects, then it's going to really slow down your like like when you try to turn it, it might like just freeze, and in worst case scenario, it might even crash. So use this sparingly, but it is my favorite and, in my opinion, the best way to add geometry for sculpting. Okay. One thing I do need to talk about. Let's kind of do this. Just as an example, I'm going to use like a plank as like practicing for the sculpting like brushes. And one thing that you might run into, let's go to Sculpt Mode. One thing you might run into is this, and that's because we scaled it on the z-axis, but we didn't apply the scale. So if we were to like, let's remesh, okay, so that it's like this. As you can see, it is like stretched more in the middle and like very cramped at the top. And when we try to do this, as you can see, it's like very up and down, and that's not what we want at all. And to fix this, you need to go back into object mode. Actually, let's undo that. Is it okay? It's undid. We're gonna go back to object mode. We're gonna Control A, and then we're gonna apply. Right now, we're only worried about the scale, but I usually just do all transformation. Like if you were to rotate this like sideways, then the top would be on the side, and then when you apply the rotation, the top would be on the top again. So I just do all transformations just so I know like we're copacetic, you know. Okay, so now when we go to Sculpt Mode and click that remesh, as you can see, it's all the vertices are more spaced out. Like it's the same here as it is on the sides. This is kind of hard to explain, but because we applied the transformation, the voxel sizes became small again. Before that, our voxel sizes were stretched out, just like our cursor was, but because we applied the transformation, and like if we go back to Sculpt Mode, you see how it's like a regular circle now. When we remeshed, everything became, this is so hard to explain, but everything became like the same size, if that makes sense. And as you can see, we have a lot of vertices to work with. So when we go to Sculpt Mode, and I'm still on Draw, and then I'm gonna put this on the negative. So when you draw, it like pushes it out, but when you press negative, it creates the opposite effect. So we're gonna dig into the shape, and I'm gonna just press F to resize this a little bit, and then we're just gonna draw like this. So yeah, and as you can see, like this is very, like this is very fine of a detail. And that's kind of what we want when we do this, right? And this is not the same as the dynamic topology where it creates like vertices as you fit. This is just the same number of vertices that we're manipulating. So we're not adding we're not adding more. It's a constant number of vertices. And as you can see, this, because we're doing everything by hand, this is kind of like a long process. And I'm just kind of just randomly, you know, guessing what a tree would look like. Oh, one thing I should probably tell you about, so I don't have to keep going over the same thing. If you press right, you can change the strength, and then the radius is the size, which we could just do with F, so we don't need to worry about that. So I'm just gonna go full strength 1.0, and then as you can see, it's a lot like thicker. So maybe I just do it the one time. That doesn't look like wood at all. But yeah, it might be like too thick, the 1.0. So like, yeah, there's one, strength of 1, and then this was like half strength. Yeah, I think I like the half strength better, even though you have to like kind of go over it multiple times to like, but yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So yeah, that's the draw brush, and the shortcut for that is X. And remember, normally it'll pop it out with this plus sign, but when we press this negative button, it pushes it in. Okay? And the next kind of brush, I guess, it's just to smooth it out. So to smooth it out, I'm just going to do this, is you just hold shift and then left click. And as you can see, like if you mess up, like it's too thick, then you can kind of go over it and fix it a little bit, and then go back to drawing it, and then fixing it. So yeah, what that does is it just smooths it out. So if we take like this top edge here, and we're just holding shift, and then we just go over this, and it just kind of smooths it out. If you don't want like such a sharp edge, that is an option for you to do. I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but yeah, that is the smooth brush, which is always available because you're probably going to mess up a lot, and you just want to like kind of smooth it. Then, yep. Okay, the next brush that we're going to talk about. So there are all these brushes, and we're not going to talk about all of them because that would just be way too long. You can kind of practice with whatever on your own. I'm just going to show you the ones that I think are important. So the next one is the pinch. And this one kind of just like pushes like a gap together. When I see this, I kind of seeing as like sewing a wound shut. Like if you imagine like stitches. That's kind of like what it does. Let's say you don't want these lines to be so thick, then you can just and yeah, that's kind of useful when you're trying to make things a little sharper, right? And not so like rounded. So yeah, that's the pinch brush, and the shortcut for that is P. Okay, we already talked about the grab brush, which I think the grab brush is the most important. You wouldn't do it for this piece because we want this to be kind of like a plank. This is like the worst plank ever. But if you were to try to like sculpt, let's say like some clothing, and you want it to like flow, you can kind of just like move it. So like, ignore the lines. Let's say this was like a scarf, okay? Like a flowy scarf. Then you could do something kind of like this. and then make it flow. And then you know what? I'm just gonna get rid of the front as much as I can by smoothing it out. Now we kind of have this like scarf. I'm just trying to add like, I don't know, what a scarf might look like. This kind of looks like a leg, but bending the wrong way. So yeah, that is the grab tool that we talked about, and the shortcut is G. Okay, I think that is all the ones I'm going to talk about today. Yeah. So yeah, your homework for today is to make a better plank than I did. Just using whatever method of adding geometry that you like, but it doesn't have to be the remesh method. But like I said, that's my favorite. And if you're working with like one or two objects like this, it's not going to be a too big a strain on your PC. But if you do a lot and like a lot bigger things, then it is going to be a bit of a strain. So yeah. And yeah, in future videos we're gonna practice with this more, but yeah, sculpting is kind of like the last resort for me, because once you start creating an object like this, it's really hard to work with. Like you can't just scale it up and make it turn back into a cube, right? Like imagine turning this back into a cube. It's impossible, right? So yeah, sculpting is kind of like the last resort when you have like when you have made your shape into pretty much what it needs to be. But yeah, this is looking like a leg. From the side anyway. So yeah, I was just messing around while I was talking. But yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.